Hey everybody, welcome to Badge Banter, where we feature some awesome stories about the value of the ID badge and how it enables organizations to better recognize and connect people. I'm Lindsay Martin-Nez, your host, and I'm super excited to welcome our guest today, Jill Lamond from Evolv Technology.
Hey, good morning, Lindsay. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. I've been looking forward to having you on ever since we met last year, honestly. So I'm glad you agreed to join me. To kind of get us started today, can you share a little bit about yourself and your background and how you ended up at Evolv?
Sure, absolutely. So currently my role at Evolv is I'm the Vice President of Education. So for me, what I'm trying to do is put the perspective of, is this good for kids? Is this good for teaching and learning? And put that lens sort of over all the technology that we're able to offer schools as part of a comprehensive safety approach. Our main products really are concealed weapons detection system, as well as an X-ray bag scanner. So those are our two, products that we bring to the market. But that being said, where I came from, I was a school administrator and I was a district level administrator in a Michigan district. Most recently served as assistant superintendent of safety and school operations. And that was actually post-incident in Oxford, Michigan, in Oxford schools, where we had a school shooting that tragically took the lives of 4 of our students and 7 others were injured on November 30th, 2021. So I've seen what can happen when schools experience the worst. And I'm absolutely committed to the mission of trying to make sure every community avoids that senseless type of tragedy.
Well, I've had the opportunity to hear your personal story several times, and it's devastating, but I always appreciate how open and vulnerable you are whenever you share it. It's really touching. And I think what you're doing now just speaks to your history and your desire to, make the world a better place and help make schools safer and really make an impact. So, something that you often talk about whenever I've heard you talk is the importance of kids having a personal connection with a trusted adult in the building whenever they're at school, and how important it is that schools really create a safe and welcoming environment. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So, whenever we're trying to implement a new technology, it's really the people and the process that have to support it. And that's something that we know from research. In 2019, the U.S. Secret Service report found that to avert school violence, the number one best way to do that was to have a single trusting adult relationship. So if we lose sight of that and we stop doing the people things and we just harden schools without understanding how it impacts students and the actual culture and climate of the building, then we're missing an opportunity to be safer and to make schools a sanctuary emotionally, not only physically, but also emotionally. Our kids should feel safe and be safe when they're trying to learn each day. And so, whenever I'm able to go into school communities, that's what we talk about. We talk about what are the great things that you're already doing for kids? What are the ways that you're connecting with them and you're getting to know them, their interests, their families, their home life? How do you translate that into a safer building? Because it really is a big part, maybe the biggest part of a school safety plan, our adult connections.
It's funny because everybody who's in the security industry, all of us get like single task focused on, our products and the impact that they make on schools or whatever market it is that we're serving. But then when you take a step back and you think about it, you're like, all right, but what about this on a personal level? And how does this impact like the way kids are feeling, and the way that the staff is feeling when they're coming into the building? And that's like this almost intangible thing that we kind of take for granted. And every time you talk, it really resonates with me because it parallels so much messaging that we put out there and what we're constantly saying about our approach to the photo ID. And like, I always feel when we're looking at badging, like people are focused on the utility of the card itself. So it's like a means to an end. So you're using it for something to track attendance or open a door. But then there's this whole psychological perspective, like what you and I are talking about here, that offers so much more to a school district. And when you can print, the student's first name in a large font where everybody can see it and visually identify, like, this is our kid and this is their name. And if you're trying to foster an environment in the school where the faculty then forms personal connections with students, how much easier is it? If you've got thousands of students, how are you supposed to remember everybody's name? But if you see, Jill walking down the hall and it says it big, it's much easier to say, hey, Jill, how are you this morning? Or good to see you this morning. Or notice if Jill looks a little bit different that morning. So I've heard you talk a lot about Dr. Susan Enfield, and she advocates aggressively to, better recognize kids in schools and help figure out who belongs to different schools. But can you share a little bit she references kind of like an experiment often in her talks that's been performed at multiple campuses and the significance of those findings.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dr. Enfield is someone that I follow and has become a friend, but she talks about knowing every student by name, and it's really important. Our names are our favorite words, our favorite thing to hear. We're all a bunch of egomaniacs, it makes us feel good to hear our names, whether we're an adult or a child. And so how do we make sure that we incorporate names into what we do each day? But the study I think you're referring to is one where several years ago, a group of researchers went to many different instructional leadership researchers, went to many different types of school communities, rural, suburban, urban, large, small, mid-range size. And they performed this sort of professional development activity. And what it was they gathered every adult in the school. And we're talking not only, teachers and educational professionals, but also food service, nutrition services, transportation, custodial, anybody who would have any type of interaction with kids that they could get during that time. And they went to like the cafeteria or a large meeting space, and they printed off just kind of a grainy photo of every kid, from your student information system, a photo of every kid on a bunch of, if you imagine it, a bunch of lunchroom tables. And they handed each adult that was involved a package of like garage sale little circular stickers, those little cheapo stickers. And they said, we want you to do a walking tour. We want you to tour around these tables. It doesn't take long. Certainly this exercise doesn't cost very much. I want you to put a sticker on a student's face if you recognize that they belong in this school. You don't have to know their name, actually. You don't even need to know their grade or anything else about them. But if you can say with certainty, this is our kid, this kid is one of ours, just put a dot and keep walking. And so they had a bunch of these adults do that. And in all of these different communities, they found pretty significant data that, a large majority of students did have stickers. But in all schools, regardless of the size and regardless of the type of community they were in or socioeconomic statuses or demographics, there was always this group of students that had no stickers. And I would take that information with what I know about school shootings and the average mass casualty school shooter and say, those are typically your school shooters. If those are the kids who don't have tethers to the community, they don't feel like they belong in the school, probably amplified by the fact that the adults don't know that they belong in the school. And so I'm not blaming the adults. I'm saying we have to have really specific processes and systems in place to ensure that every kid is recognized and that we learn their names and that we celebrate them when they come to school each day. We have significant issues across the country with absenteeism, chronic absenteeism, kids who aren't coming to school. There are many, many different reasons for that. I'm not going to oversimplify it. But one way that we can address that is to make them feel like they want to be there, to make them feel like it is a safe place where there are grownups who care about them. I know I'm on my soapbox, but if you think about during COVID, when schools had to shut down, we noticed that schools were providing not just instruction and not just educational learning environments, but we saw how many kids didn't get to eat each day. We saw how many kids weren't getting warm clothing in the wintertime because our schools are providing so much more nurturing and support to these kids. And I just think that, knowing who they are may be the first and most important step.
You could talk about this all day and it wouldn't bother me at all. So don't feel like you're on your soapbox, because I'm equally as passionate about that market and don't even have like the connection or personal tie to it that you do in your career. And I love hearing you talk about it. It's devastating sometimes when you hear things like that. Like every time I hear the sticker story, you're like, man, but you can't blame anybody. There's thousands of kids potentially in schools, and even in your smaller schools, hundreds, and they're passing by quickly every day and adult interactions with them are short. So I think the more focused schools can be on it, and they are focused on it. Like, let's not pretend that schools don't care. They want to create.
Oh, absolutely.
That's like their main goal, is to create a great inclusive environment and have people feel good about it. It's just that you have to be really, I think, purposeful and like do things with intention and talk about it a lot. Because otherwise, things go by the wayside, or you build policies and procedures and then 2 months into school, like something else happens and changes. And so I think they just have to really be focused on it.
Well, I'm friends with a lot of educators, right? And have a family with many educators and former educators. And there's a feeling of helplessness right now. Our world is wild and crazy. I would say personally, since COVID, it just seems like, you're almost watching a movie when you're watching the news, right? And so if you're an educator today and you're thinking specifically about school safety and what can I do, I'm not making the decisions of, what locking mechanisms are on the doors, or I'm not making the decisions of what technology we purchase in the district. You can connect with as many kids as possible. That's what you can do. And that is what you want to do. But let's get back to the basics. Let's, forget about the very big wild things that we're doing in schools. We have to do so much as educators. I don't know. I mean, how familiar you are with just the plate of an educator, but I would challenge anyone watching who has connections with kids to focus on that first and foremost. That is going to impact safety. That is going to impact culture and climate. And eventually that will also impact instructional goals and learning, overall learning in that space.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's really great advice. So I love that from if you're an educator perspective, like what can you do to make an impact? And obviously, better than a lot of us, the challenges that school face on a daily basis and like how they're trying to make decisions and how many things they have on their plate and they want to implement solutions and drive change. But in your opinion, like, what are some of the biggest obstacles that schools are facing on a daily basis? And how would you recommend that like our channel partners, people who are trying to work with schools, better serve the schools that they do want to work with?
I really appreciate that question because I think a lot of times we forget, what challenges our potential customers are facing, right? And I think schools right now are definitely approaching and have already some fallen off an ESSER cliff. So they were receiving all of this ESSER federal funding post-COVID, and we're able to use that to fill a lot of holes. Some schools were able to use that for certain projects that freed up money to hire additional paraprofessionals, for example, or hire additional bus drivers or things like that. And now in the absence of that money, they're scrambling and having to reallocate in their budgets. And that can be really extremely stressful, not only because you're losing money, but because it's impacting kids, because that these programs that you maybe put in place that are actually really successful no longer have a funding source. And so now what am I not going to do? I feel like that was such a large part of my job on cabinet when I was in Oxford, was looking at the budget and deciding what we're not going to do, because never seems like there is enough money. So anyway, all of our schools are suddenly, had this influx of money and now no longer have it. And so many of them, unless they made specific capital purchases and, hardware or things that they own, a lot of them put that towards people to try and impact change, and now are having to decide which people to get rid of or which programs to cut. And that can be really emotional and really difficult. The other thing too, obviously, the gun violence epidemic in our country, and that's where sort of my space that I'm focused on. We know from recent studies with teachers, I think the last one was in the spring, and I can provide that for your listeners, but showing that a very large percentage of teachers across the country are living their day in anxiety. And that anxiety could be fueled by many different things, but several of them explicitly stated it was anxiety about gun violence. When I was in the classroom, and that was kind of a long time ago now, but when I was in the classroom and I was teaching, if my door were closed and I heard kind of like a scuffle in the hallway and I heard students, my initial gut reaction would be, it's probably a fist fight, right? I would just assume it was body on body. That would just be where my head went. Do I go out there and break the kids up, or do I call security? Today, many of our teachers, I would argue most of our teachers are in that classroom, and the first thing that they hear, their immediate reaction is it a gun? Is this a shooting? Where do I hide the kids? What corner do they go in? Do we have a window to get out of? Do I need to grab a pair of scissors to fight back? How am I going to protect these babies? Like, what a way to go about your job every day. When you haven't received, many of them, the training for that, I'm talking, they're not first responders. They're not people who are intending to go into these high risk situations, but many of them are feeling like they are in a high risk, violent situation pretty often. There was a study, and again, I can provide it for you, that last year, approximately a third, I think it was 34% of all secondary school teachers in this country experienced an actual lockdown due to violence. So not a drill, we're talking about an actual legitimate lockdown because of violence in their building. So this is something that's happening really frequently. And we hear a lot more about the mass casualty incidents, like the one that I experienced, and those are horrific and those make headlines. But far more common are these escalations of disputes. So what's happening is a middle school or high school student whose brain isn't fully developed, who doesn't have great decision-making skills, who's put into a stressful situation that probably would have been a fist fight, has access to a weapon in their backpack or on their person and uses it, or even brandishes it to try and scare the other student. And these are really terrifying incidents for all of their classmates and all of the staff. And that leads me to the final thing, which is related, which is shortages of people. We don't have enough educational professionals that are in the pipeline even to fill the many vacancies across the country. If you look at the schools in your area and just look at what jobs are posted, there are so many vacancies across the United States, for a variety of reasons that we don't have time to get into. One of them potentially being this anxiety about violence.
And I think about how much a teacher has to deal with on a daily basis. I'm like cognizant of it anytime I email my daughter's teacher, and I'm like, okay, wait, like, are we really going to ask her this question? Do I need the answer to this? Because like, I just think about how much they have to deal with just in teaching and in dealing with the class of students, third graders, sixth graders, whatever grade it is they teach. And then you add this anxiety into it, and worrying about your safety. Like I'm fortunate. I don't come to work every day and worry that if I hear something going on in the hall, it's like a violent incident occurring. And I can't even imagine like the psychological toll, and just the anxiety that you would feel. But then, we do want more teachers. So how do you recruit them to come work in this environment? It's brutal. So I appreciate you speaking to it and shedding some light on it. I think that if you don't live in that world, sometimes it's easy to take for granted how much teachers and educators do for our kids and our communities.
Well, one thing that I really urge district leaders to think about is how do you bring the teacher's voice and the ancillary staff voice into safety planning? These individuals are interacting with the students every day. They know our kids. You talk to a principal, any principal I've ever met feels such ownership over their school community, over their kids and their families. They know their people. How do you bring that knowledge into safety planning in a way that's really constructive and helps people at the top who are making the decisions with that budget to understand what the schools really need? And again, they already are so busy. They're already doing so much. You only have typically one or maybe two prep periods during a day that you're using to quickly prepare for your other classes. Are we going to require them to come after school for more meetings, or before school? So I understand the balance there. But I think inviting in the teacher's voice and assigning value to educators and what they have to bring to the safety planning table, so to speak, is really important and is often missed. Many times for positive reasons, because we're trying to spare them that time suck, right? Like, we don't have time for this. I don't want to add another thing. I think that I know many of our teachers are passionate about safety and could and should be part of those conversations in a way that's systematic, that we never lose that voice.
I appreciate that. That's a great point. Before we kind of wrap up some of my questions for you, I know you're really involved in multiple organizations, but one of them you're really passionate about is Zero Now. Can you kind of tell our listeners a little bit about Zero Now if they're interested in learning more about it, where they can go find some information?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Zero Now is a nonprofit organization, and it's not only school leaders and individuals from the security world, but it's also, technology providers as well. And so it's sort of an ecosystem to try and get to zero school shootings urgently right now. And we have the Path to Safer Schools. And that idea is no matter where you are as a school district right now, no matter where you are in your safety path, you could always take another step. So whether you're very early in that, securing vestibules and just putting in, video phones, or you're all the way to advanced weapons detection where I'm at, with my technology, wherever you're at, we want to help bring you a step further. And there are a lot of resources, free resources to help people do that. And really also trying to just advocate for change the way we think about school safety. It isn't a thing. It isn't like you're going to put in one technology and you figured it out. Now we're safe. It doesn't work like that. It's a layered approach. And so how do you make sure that each layer is actually functioning optimally with the other layers, and they're integrated and they're working together to keep your buildings and your campuses safer? It's not an easy thing to do. And speaking as someone who went to school for English and I have an English degree and an MBA, I never imagined that I would be doing safety planning in my district role. And when I was in that district role, it was one of so many other things that I was asked to do. So one other, tenet sort of the Zero Now community is we really believe there should be a dedicated school safety director. And ideally that person would report to the superintendent or be a part of cabinet in some way so that voice is never lost. And many districts, school safety sits in multiple departments, which was the case for me. You have a piece of this, you have a piece of this. Until I was assigned safety post-incident, safety was in multiple different departments. And that really is not the best way to function as a school district. So Zero Now, check us out online. It's a large group. It's getting larger. It's exciting. And we're trying to get as many school administrators and school teachers and, school board members involved as possible to make sure that all perspectives are at the table to urgently solve this issue of school gun violence.
Well, I love that. I love what you're doing. I love your messaging. I love how much of what you say parallels what we say on a daily basis. You and I could go on like a whole tour all over the country and share similar messaging with totally different vantage points. I mean, obviously we sell very different solutions, but I think at the end of the day, like, you're right. It's about having a layered approach and really considering the needs of the school that you're trying to work with and trying to come up with a solution and understand that they can't do everything that they want to do necessarily. And being flexible.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. One of the best things that I ever saw, and one of the reasons I actually ended up coming ultimately to the company I'm at now, is because I watched a sales pitch. I watched sort of, to try and learn more about them. And I heard a sales executive say, I don't think you're ready for us. I think there are other ways for you to spend your money that would have bigger impact right now. And to have that kind of integrity in the process, and I know that's the case with Badge Pass, I know that's the case with several of our partners that you and I both work with, that to me is like the number one indicator of whether or not you should work with a technology company. Are they willing to tell you there are better ways to spend your money? Your kids and your people could be safer sooner if you do something else. And when you're ready for me, let me know. I think there has to be that integrity in the process. And that's missing from too many of our competitors, my friend.
Yep, you're not wrong. I do love that. So great point. Well, these are fun questions, a little deep, honestly. We went deep today, but I love that. And I mean, I think it's important content. I'm glad that we covered it and appreciate it. So we've added a new segment. So you will be the first episode of season 2, and this will be the first time that our listeners will hear this segment. But this new segment is called Badge Blitz, and I think it's just a fun way to kind of get to know you personally and get a little insight into how you think. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit you with some rapid fire questions. We are going to set a timer for 1 minute. And so you will give me your immediate gut reaction to these questions.
Okay. I'll do my best.
These are not challenging. But hopefully we'll get through all of them. All right. You ready?
Yes. Ready.
All right. Let's do it. If you could swap jobs with anybody for one day, who would it be?
President.
What's one thing every school should do to increase security?
Learn their students' names.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Flying.
What is a current industry practice or outdated technology that drives you crazy?
Not locking your doors.
Oh man, that one gets me too. If you had to give a TED Talk tomorrow, what topic would you choose to talk about?
I'm actually going to go totally off script and talk about trying to parent and mom while working full time. That's been the balance here. So.
Oh my God, I'm super passionate about that too. So I'm with you on this one. And last one, in your opinion, what is the most overused phrase in meetings or emails today?
Oh my goodness. Circle back. We're going to circle back to this. We're going to circle back with a lot.
That's a good one. I'm with you. Circle back and boil the ocean are like my two least favorite phrases that get used in meetings or emails. So awesome. Well, this was super fun. I really enjoyed chatting with you. I always do. Anybody who's interested in getting to know Jill better, she's like an open book. So feel free to reach out to her. I'm sure she would welcome a conversation with anybody who would like to talk to her.
Absolutely. Please do. And talk about anything related to schools and school safety, not only the product that I happen to represent. I'm passionate about this. So thank you,
Thanks
Lindsay.
again, Jill. Thanks for joining us today. And for all of our listeners, we hope you'll join us next time as we take you beyond the badge.